All right, we only have 50 minutes together, so I'm going to go ahead and jump on in, do the intro, background information, and let folks trickle in. So I am very excited to have you all here today. Welcome to our session on plastics and environmental justice and public health. My name is Natalie Sampson. I'm the co-lead of our M-LEEaD Center's Community Engagement Core. So the work of our Community Engagement Core for the Michigan Center for Life Stage Environmental Exposures and Disease, it's a mouthful, or M-LEEaD as we call it, is supported by the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, a P30 grant. And I want to emphasize that the work we do, the things we talk about, the topics of these webinars are really guided by our advocacy board. So many of the folks that work on these very issues, so folks from Eastside Community Action Network, Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, Detroit Health Department, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Sierra Club, We the People of Detroit, Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, Ecology Center, Trask Center, and Green Door Initiative, among others, and just really recognizing the role they play in shaping the work we do to try to connect communities, youth, policymakers, and researchers about environmental issues that we all care about. So this is part of a series called Residents and Researchers, and we really try to focus on action-oriented, solutions-oriented research. So translating that science into policy, informing policy efforts, advocacy efforts. We've covered lots of topics: air quality, disaster preparedness, healthcare waste, immigrant worker health, water affordability, and many more. And we can share that link with those of you who are here, and we'll add it to the comments of the recording. So we're going to hear from our guests, and we want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. So feel free, as questions come up, to throw them in the Q&A or the chat, and I will be monitoring them. We'll come back to those at the end. But I want to get to what they have to say. So I'll just also quickly mention there was a talk last week by Dr. Matt Campen on nanoplastics and human health and some of his research. So the two likely complement each other. And so we'll make sure you have that link as well. So as promised, we're going to hear from some folks on microplastics, public health, and EJ. We're going to keep it pretty high level, but we can get into the weeds if folks have questions and make sure there's an opportunity for any follow-up that might happen or be needed. All right, so here I go. I'm going to finally introduce who we have with us today. So we have from the Ecology Center, Erica Bloom and Melissa Cooper Sargent. So Erica is an environmental health and justice grad from the University of Montana's master's program. Originally from Michigan, she has worked in Michigan's food systems since 2010. She's experienced in program development, policy, coalition building, and grant writing. Now at the Ecology Center, she focuses on leading the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network and supporting projects through the organization's Healthy Stuff Lab, which we'll have to find out what the Healthy Stuff Lab is, perhaps. So Melissa comes as a former educator director of the local Motion Green, and she continues that work while at the Ecology Center, where she's been since 2001, educating the public about how to avoid toxics in their everyday life, trying to reach thousands of people using lots of platforms, and really getting out the information and translating it into plain language in a way that more of us can understand. She also works with the Healthy Stuff program and the Children's Environmental Health program. And of course, we also have Katie Morelli, the campaign organizer for Breathe Free Detroit. Katie, I think that's still your current affiliation. Am I right? Cool. She's a seasoned activist who many of you, if you've been in the area, have probably heard of her work. Particularly, she was involved with many others in working on issues related to Detroit's incinerator, which is no longer in use, and has really worked on several grassroots community-powered campaigns to address different environmental justice issues, worked with organizations such as Gaia, Break Free from Plastics, U.S. Environmental Justice Delegation to the Global Plastics Treaty, and the Michigan's Environmental Justice Caucus. So we have some wonderful humans here who are getting the work done, and I appreciate them taking the time to be with us today, and I'm going to hand it off to Melissa, I think, to get us started or get the slides up and running.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, everybody, for being here today and taking time out, maybe on your lunch hour here. So I'm going to share some slides here. Here we go. Are you guys seeing it? No.
It's like it's on its way.
Okay. Over there. Okay. It was smooth in the practice run. Okay. Okay, thanks. Thanks for that wonderful welcome, and thanks for inviting us to be here, Natalie. And so I'm Melissa Cooper Sargent, and you'll hear from Erica Bloom and KT Morelli as we go on. So we wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of some microplastics 101, and forgive us if this is stuff that you guys are already familiar with, but we want to just really make sure that we're all on the same page with what we're talking about here. So microplastics are really tiny bits of plastic, so 5 millimeters or smaller. So I have a few props. I don't know if you can still see my video, but it's like the size of a pencil eraser, like the length of it, or smaller. So that's pretty tiny. And we're going to talk about nanoplastics a little bit as well. And they can be fragments or pellets, or a lot of what we're seeing are fibers. So just tiny little threads coming off of clothes and other things. And they're broken down from what we call macroplastics, which is basically just anything that we might have. I have another prop. I'm not sure if you can see me, but like a macroplastic, which would maybe be like a plastic container of raspberries. That's called a macroplastic. Let's see if I can go to the next. Ooh, my slide is not forwarding. Hang on a second. Okay, there we go. Okay, so another, still considering microplastics, and that they can be created purposefully, and that's called nurdles or microbeads, where they're nurdles are what is created in order to then create bigger, other plastics, macroplastics, and then the microbeads are created on purpose to go into some personal care products and other things. But most often they're breaking down from other products: car tires, plastic bags, plastic bottles, our clothing that's made out of polyester, even latex paint. And so these things break down with use, or when they're exposed to the heat or the sun or the wind or the waves. And we want to keep in mind that plastics are toxic and harmful throughout their entire life cycle, from extraction to manufacturing, during the consumption. So while we're using them, as they're being landfilled, and then at the end of their life, which is what we're seeing when we see microplastics. And so some of you may have heard of nanoplastics. And so that is what's when the microplastics break down even further to something that is 1 micron in length, and they're really not visible from the human eye. And being so small, it means that they can build up in our tissues, in our organs, and even in our brains. They can pass through cell walls. They can really get everywhere. So there's a lot of concern with nanoplastics. And I think there's even a new term called picoplastics, which is even tinier. We won't really touch on that today. So the term that we're hearing now is MNPs, which stands for the micro nanoplastics. So maybe you've heard of that, maybe not. But so there's a photo of some microplastics that have been picked up on the beach. And so where are these being found? Everywhere, basically, anywhere people are looking. So they're being found in the Great Lakes and other freshwater systems, in the ocean, in plankton, in fish, birds, other wildlife, in the soil. They're even being found in drinking water, wastewater, the air, which is very scary to think about. There was an article within the past year about sea spray, because there's microplastics in the ocean. When the ocean waves crash on the rocks on the shore, it gets into the air. That's one way that it can get into the air. But just breathing, we can inhale microplastics. And so microplastics have also been found in humans. I went too far. 1 second. Okay. So exposure alone is not concerning. I mean, it can be concerning, but we need to, what is the harm to humans? What's happening when we are ingesting microplastics? So there's still a lot of research that's being done. I think we're still at the kind of early stages of some of this research, but already we're finding that it can cause the death of human cells and tissue, inflammation, stress, and negative immune responses. So again, we can inhale it, we can ingest it, or even dermal contact. I'm not sure how many people have heard of the term plastosphere. This is a fairly new term to me, and it refers to the unique ecosystem of bacteria and other organisms that live on the surface of plastics when they're in the water or in the soil. And there was an article that came out, some research that came out just this week about how that film that can exist on top of the microplastics can harbor E. coli and kind of give them a free pass and some other harmful bacteria or viruses. So there's a whole new ecosystem that's existing on these tiny bits of plastic. It's not just plastic alone that's floating around. The plastic alone also would be concerning enough because there's 15,000 different chemicals that can be in plastic, including formaldehyde, lead, cadmium. So you have both the concern of the plastic itself and then what's existing on top of it. So what's the harm to wildlife? I think a lot of us have seen some photos of aquatic birds and fish that have been cut open that are full of plastic in their digestive systems. And this photo shows plastic, just a lot of plastic floating around in the water. So some of the research is showing that aquatic invertebrates such as mollusks, crabs, shrimp, jellyfish, it can slow down their feeding. It can decrease their fertility rates, decrease their development. For fish, it can cause damage to their intestines, their liver, gills, their brain. It can impact also their behavior and their fertility. So again, a lot of stuff we're still learning, still yet to find out. Okay, and so what is being done? And we can look globally, nationally, within Michigan. So we're going to start with nationally. In 2015, and before that, there was an effort to just start with the low-hanging fruit, is we can stop putting intentional microplastics, aka microbeads, in our skincare products. So like the exfoliating facial wash or body wash or other things that had exfoliating properties, or toothpaste that had sparkles in it. Those sparkles, if you remember those were microbeads. So in 2015, those were banned from body scrubs and other cosmetics. But there's a lot more to be done. These next two have been introduced but not passed yet. So the Fighting Fibers Act would address the microfiber pollution from clothing. So when we are washing clothing or blankets that are made from fleece, polyester, those kind of things, you see a lot of advertisements for fleece clothing right now for the winter time to keep us cozy and warm. And we got to just try to avoid buying anything new. And also, I enjoy a good thrift store haul, and I would always feel like, okay, I like to try to wear natural fibers. But if I'm buying it at thrift, maybe it's okay to buy the fleece or the polyester. But now we're learning that as we wash those items, the plastic fibers are getting into the wastewater, and then that's one way that they're getting into our water systems. So the Fighting Fibers Act would address that pollution from clothing by requiring filters on the washing machines, just like we have filters on the dryers. There would be filters on the washing machines, and that would come with any new machine. And people can purchase those filters now, but really it's something that should not be up to the individual. Like, it's great, do it if you're able to do that, but it's something that should be standardized. And there's the Plastic Pellet Free Waters Act of 2024, which would control the use and management of nurdles under the Clean Water Act. So nurdles are like the precursor to making plastics. They create them in the tiny little pellets, and those are shipped around, and they can spill. And there's been they can cause a lot of harm. And when there's just millions and millions of nurdles that have spilled, and it's really difficult to clean them up. Okay. Oh, went too far. Sorry, my changing slides is not very smooth. Okay, so in Michigan, there are efforts to ban the ban. So right now there is a Public Act 389, which does not allow cities, municipalities to regulate plastic bags in their community. So if any city in Michigan wanted to say, oh, we want to ban plastic bags and require people to bring cloth bags or some alternative to the store, they couldn't do it because there's the state Public Act 389. So there's the Michigan House Bill 4359 that would repeal that Public Act 389 and put that power back in the hands of cities to try to take control of those and maybe pass a plastic bag ban. There's other upcoming bills that have not yet been introduced, so they don't have a bill number yet, but those would establish statewide research and monitoring, and also establish a monitoring program for drinking water. And I'm going to pass it off to KT Morelli, who will be with me. We're going to be doing Zooms tomorrow, talking with Michigan legislators about these bills. But KT has also been working locally on the city level to try to get a plastic bag ban, but also globally. So KT's doing work on all levels. So I'm going to pass the next slide over to you, KT, to tell us what's happening globally.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And as you change the slide, I just wanted to add a little bit that, there's a lot of work to continue to fight plastic pollution. And here in the city of Detroit, we were breathing in plastic as it was being incinerated in a nearby incinerator. And the effects of burning plastic, it is really detrimental to our community's health and any community that lives near a plastic thermal treatment facility, and that includes incineration or chemical recycling. There's a lot of false solutions out there that are being pushed by the fossil fuel industry because plastic is from fossil fuels, and they're trying their best to figure out how to keep fracking and keep the fossil fuel industry alive through plastic production. So plastic is an issue that is so broad that we need a treaty to deal with it, right? So, there's a problem. There's a treaty that's being made to help regulate it. So just a little bit of background about the Global Plastic Treaty is that on March 2022, the United Nations voted to adopt a global treaty to end plastic pollution and hold all the countries to a high common standard on plastic consumption and create a clear path toward a future that's free from plastic pollution. So now more than 170 countries are negotiating the exact details of what that treaty would be. And the final round of these negotiations are taking place next week in Busan in the Republic of Korea. So it's exciting times, but there's been a huge amount of pushback from fossil fuel countries. And to be honest, the United States is not being a leader in any way in pushing for a very strong treaty negotiation. So it's a little bit disappointing, but we are a fossil fuel country as well. But if done right, the treaty can effectively cut plastic production, ban unnecessary plastic products, promote reuse systems, especially ancestral and indigenous reuse systems that we used to have in place before plastic. We haven't had plastic for very long, pretty much since the 50s. We know we can live without it, so we can move back there or have better alternatives for our future. And phasing out harmful chemicals is also a big part of what this treaty should be entailing, because as Melissa said, over 15,000 different chemicals are used to make plastics. And many of those are not even regulated. and so, and then the combination of them is completely unknown to our health, and have pretty grotesque health effects, as we're finding out. As part of the environmental justice delegation for the Global Plastic Treaty through Breakthrough from Plastic, I represent communities that are affected from incineration, but I work right next to, alongside folks that are representing communities that are affected by plastic from the time it's extracted out of the ground to the time it's processed within their communities and used and then, wasted. And so one thing that is really very clear is that there is no safe or sustainable level of plastic production. So that just means that we have to stop producing so much plastic. We need to definitely reduce and stop using all of the single-use plastics that we have. That's a great place to start, because the majority of plastics used today is for single-use, like what Melissa showed you from that raspberry container. Is that, I bought a container of raspberries last week and I ate those raspberries, and that container is going to be living on this earth for 500 years. And also plastic circularity is not possible, right? Because plastic is not circular. If anything, it is downcycled. You cannot make a new plastic product with an old, by recycling old plastics. And we're finding that there's less and less data out there to really support the fact that we can even introduce recycled plastic in products that we use commonly for food, because it's just too dangerous. There's too many chemicals that are in plastics to even recycle them to make it safe for human health and to put next to our food. So there's a lot of issues, a lot of problems in a lot of countries, and a lot of people are stepping up to create a clear path for the future. But there's a lot of power in these fossil fuel companies, and they are getting entangled with countries and the delegates. And so it's going to really take a lot of folks, a lot of you folks who are on this call, to make sure you push for plastic legislation and restrictions, and to even practice, plastic-free lives in your own homes helps a lot. But let's be real, it's a fossil fuel problem. At the bottom of this slide here, you can scan that with your phone, and I'll put the link also in the chat to the Breakthrough from Plastic webpage about the Global Plastic Treaty, so that you can see what you can do to advocate for a plastic-free future. Thank you all.
Thanks, KT. I'm going to go to the next slide. So KT has been fighting for all of us on the global scale and local scale and statewide scale. So thank you, KT, for all your work. And now I'm going to pass it to Erica Bloom to talk a little bit about the Ecology Center's community science efforts that we've been doing regarding plastics and microplastics.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, so I'm with the Ecology Center, like Melissa, and one of the projects that I work closely on is our Healthy Stuff Lab. And in that lab, we actually have a lab in our office, but it's also really project-based through science research. We conduct research and test consumer products, air, soil, water, fish, food, all of this environmental media for different toxic chemicals. And more and more our work is partnering with communities that have seen the most harm around pollution, plastics. I work a lot on PFAS chemicals as well. And so we really believe that the research should be driven, and the research and the advocacy should be driven by community, and to be in communities and doing some of this work is a very important kind of value. So earlier this year, we were actually approached by an organization called Sidewalk Detroit, which has done a lot of kind of arts-based engagement around social issues and environmental issues in Detroit. If you could go back. Yeah. Oh, just stay on that slide. Thanks. And they wanted to do something around the Rouge River and really engage a community around a park near the Rouge River. And so we got to talking about some of the sampling we had done on the Rouge prior, some of the plastics work too. And we decided that we would do a few different things. We organized some hands-on workshops to educate community members and a lot of youth about what's happening with plastics and our watersheds. So you can see here, this is a picture of one of those workshops. If you go to the next slide, I can explain a little bit more what we did. So we ended up working with young people who came for, a series of workshops, and we went to the Rouge River and got buckets of water. And in this picture, you can see we used filters, and we actually poured the water in and filtered out kind of the water. And then there was like a little paper filter, kind of similar like a coffee filter kind of feel. And we were able to put that under a microscope and have the young people look and see what they were finding in the water. And so you can see here, I have an arrow pointing to a microplastic. And in this case, it looks like kind of a thread. So likely could come from, fabric, synthetic material, like Melissa was talking about. But we don't know exactly where it comes from. But we do know that pretty much every filter, water filter and microscope under a microscope had something that looked along the lines of that kind of material. And so that tells us, these are very ubiquitous in our watersheds. They're getting in through, plastics breaking down, but also, our washing machines and other industries. So it was a good opportunity for people to really see firsthand, because you can't really, if you just go to the river or any water body, you can't often see microplastics or these nanoplastics. And so this was a good way to really bring people, engage them, and think critically about what they could do as young people in the community, kind of why it's a problem, and have discussions right there on site. So next slide. So as part of this project, we also worked with a Detroit-based artist, and she is very skilled in making sculptures and has done a lot of murals and kind of material, using different types of materials in Detroit to make her art. And so we had collected, macroplastics, you call, lots of bottles and things from the Rouge River earlier in the spring. And this artist had collected all of them. So during those times of workshops, the young people also kind of cut plastics, created little flowers out of them. And all of this was to create this bigger installation, which you can see in this picture, that the artist did as like a semi-permanent structure in a park that went to the Rouge River. And as part of this project, we invited community members to talk about plastics in the river and, what this installation means. And so it's really a way to leverage the science and get people to pay attention. And people did, and it was a good turnout. We got some good media coverage on it. We had great participation from the community and young people. So, I mean, it was a very successful project. And I think the reason that, I'm bringing this kind of thing up is that these are the sorts of things that when you're trying to think about how to engage at a local level or even broader than that, what is it that are going to bring people to the discussion? And we really thought about mixing science and art and having people just have a forum to talk about these things. So yeah, that was a project we did this year. It was really quite fun. And I'm hoping that we can do something again like this around plastics. So next slide. And then, we talked a lot about what can you do? I mean, this is a global problem, obviously, that we said. And, a lot of times we think about, well, what is it that we can do personally? And there are things that we should and could be doing. Knowing that, we also have to think about what it means to change our systems of, resource extraction and plastics, because the problem isn't just about disposal. Really, we really want to focus on source reduction and reducing the amount of plastics that are being produced, because there's a whole host of issues that come just from that whole life cycle that was on one of those earlier slides. But for all of us, there are things that do make a difference, really taking kind of a plastic inventory of seeing where are all the places that you use plastic in your life. And you'd be surprised, from food packaging to wrappers, to everything, all of our kind of materials that we use throughout the day. You can think about that and start using, refillable glass bottles, metal water bottles. Look for things that aren't in plastic packaging as much as you can. That's why some of the things that I take with me from the food systems work, the more that we're more connected to our food and buying directly from farmers or local producers, really the less plastic there is. And, the grocery store is filled with plastic and we all go there and we all buy it, but you could start thinking about some of your habits. Don't microwave food in plastic. Hopefully folks know this. Don't heat that up. It releases toxins. And try not to put hot foods or drinks into, plastic containers. So there's probably a lot more that if we had, time we could talk about, but these are just some simple things that you can kind of take stock of in your own life to do. Next slide. And yeah, we actually talked a lot about these things earlier in our presentation, but just to kind of hit home, think about the clothes that you're using. What kind of materials are they made? I mean, I'm wearing like a fleece sweatshirt right now, which is probably plastic. So it's not easy. And we recognize that. But think about, are there more natural materials that you can do instead of these polyester, nylons, and fleeces? Because in our homes is a lot of times where these things can kind of circulate through the air, through the fibers, couches, carpets. Recommended using vacuum with a HEPA filter and clean with a wet cloth to get dust off. And, vacuuming and dusting is actually very important to getting some of these toxins removed from your indoor air quality. And then, like Melissa was saying, there's been some acts and legislation around, mandating filters on your washing machine, but you can actually go and purchase a filter, now and kind of that would make a big difference. So I think that's the last slide. I think we are finished there and kind of open it up if people want to talk through or have questions.
Thank you so much, you three. Covered a great amount of ground. Even when I think I know what's going on, I did not know the word nurdle. So thank you for teaching me. And what was it? Plastisphere?
Plastisphere.
Plastisphere. All right. I got to practice saying it. But I really appreciate you all sharing the science, the policy, the art, and talking about things at different scales. Obviously, that is all really important. I have some questions coming in, but I'm going to just start us off in, I think almost all of you alluded to this, but I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind saying a little bit more about how this is also a matter of environmental justice, which I think KT really spoke to that. But if you want to say a little bit more, that might be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So plastic from every stage is affecting communities. And affects everybody, right? We're finding plastic in the snow as it comes down from the cloud. Yet, like for us here in Detroit, we would be receiving waste from so many different counties around ours, and Canada, and many different states to burn here in my neighborhood. And the most problematic health effects are from burning plastics. And there's no filter that exists today to be able to completely filter out the harmful effects. So my community lost, like my neighborhood association, which is a 5x8 block area, lost 22 of its members to COVID. And that's just, we have a lot of a vacant land around us too. So it's a big number to lose. And a lot of it is because of the effects that we saw from, living next to an incinerator for so long, and the harmful effects that it had on our lungs and on our bodies. At the same time, the majority of fracking for oil right now is for single-use plastic. And so the fracking communities that are in Pennsylvania and in other places along Appalachia are experiencing polluted waterways and the same type of chemical and endocrine disrupting harms that my community faces or had faced when the incinerator was in operation, because those chemicals come out of the ground as well to make the plastics, and then so they're affecting the communities that are living around extraction, and those are mostly poor working white communities, and then from there you take it to the processing facilities down in Louisiana and North Texas, and the communities that live around those processing facilities to take from oil to make it into plastics are also environmental justice communities experiencing, again, the same cancers, lung, heart, and other issues, fertility issues. Like it's really wild to be able to sit at the same table of communities that are affected by plastic extraction to production to the end of life, where I'm at, and to know that we're experiencing the same types of health problems. And so, yes, plastic pollution is affecting everybody around the globe, affecting all the waterways and all the soil and our food systems and everything, but it disproportionately affects environmental justice communities that live around the places that are, required to produce plastics in the first place. So just know that little raspberry container, has a very wicked, creation into this world. I hope that helps.
I'll put the slide back up about the life cycle. If I could.
Yeah, Melissa, I think it does capture some of what KT was saying, and then sort of humanizing the experiences of living in that community at each step of the life cycle, for sure. So I'm seeing some other questions come in, and I appreciate it for those who are asking about, well, what do we do and what can we recycle and how do we get away from this? I see Erica added a slide or a link to Ecology Center, has some great resources. I don't know if you all want to respond to sort of how do we make sense of this? For instance, folks love the art installation, but then they said, is this still just plastic in the environment? And also like the recycling questions here. So I don't know if you want to weigh in a little bit more, Erica, on some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think, and that was with the art, that was something we talked about is like, okay, we're creating art, there's plastic, and this is going to be a semi-permanent installation. We're going to make sure we take it down and cause the artist was very conscious about causing the least harm, further harm to the environment. So it's real though. I mean, I think when we talk a lot about plastics and like public discourse, it's like how to recycle it and how to use, dispose of it, how to make the least amount of plastic waste. And I think that as I've learned recently, being at the Ecology Center and being in this movement, is that that's really not the solution, is that a lot of plastic actually doesn't get recycled. And we've been living on a bit of a myth that the chemical and, oil extractable, industries have been telling us for decades, and that, we don't need to make less plastic. Really, the solution is just we need to be able to figure out how to, create a circular plastic economy. And there's recently been a lot, kind of an expose and things that are really saying, that's actually not the real answer, and it's actually causing more harm. And we won't get into, but there's a lot around chemical recycling right now, or advanced recycling, which I know many of us believe that's kind of a false solution because it causes other issues. But all of this to say is that we really need to get away from the narrative that like recycling will save us, I think, from some of the really big problems that we've discussed here. And yes, some types of plastic are better at being recycled than others, but it's really, there's something about zero waste. Okay, that's good. Thank you, KT. that we should be thinking a lot more upstream around the production of plastic and reducing our dependence on plastic. So that was a kind of more of a theoretical answer than exactly, but anyone else want to contribute to that?
Well, if you think on it, I'll just say there's more questions coming in about, choices we all make, but I'll take the point that Erica's making of looking at the system, thinking critically, looking for false solutions, recognizing that we're moving in a direction together if we're leaning on some of these advocacy tracks that you're all talking about. Someone is also asking about how we can bake this into education more. I don't know if any of you have been working. It sounds like there were some young people involved with the Sidewalk Detroit project. Melissa, you work on some children's issues. Any other resources or comment on kind of how we bake this into our children's experience? Unfortunately, we know that this is the world they live in. So how do we do that?
I think there's all kinds of ways to do that. And replicating the science experiment that we did with Sidewalk Detroit is one way. Getting some, if you're near a waterway, grabbing some water and getting some buckets and then pouring it through some filters and then looking at it under a microscope and seeing what you see. But I'm sure there's so many other educational opportunities to infuse this education, getting kids involved, because this is affecting them, even if they don't know it. And this is the world that we're, handing them in the next. And so I think it's very important that we continue to work with kids and infusing art and joy and poetry or beauty, finding ways to enjoy the work, and not, because it can be some difficult material and can be hard mentally.
Thanks, Melissa. Yes, important to point out. Folks are also want to know more about this policy action. So I'm not sure if they're looking to talk more about what's happening in Michigan. Any other insights or ways that I appreciate that it sounds like Melissa and KT are headed tomorrow to educate our decision makers on these issues. What more should folks be thinking about in Michigan or beyond?
Yeah, I think there is work to be done, and there are other bills that could be introduced. The state of California came very close to passing a bill that would require the filters on the washing machines. And in fact, it did pass both chambers, but then it was vetoed by the governor. So, and I think that's one bill that could be introduced in Michigan, and it would be great to get some traction there. Yeah, just trying to be involved. There are various groups that you can be involved with, the Michigan Microplastics Coalition, or you can stay abreast with with either the Ecology Center or Breathe Free Detroit. Michigan Environmental Council is also working on this. So just staying informed and taking action when and where you can. Get comfortable with talking to your legislator, your decision makers, your city council members. These folks are representing us and they work for us. And so if your legislator holds some coffee hours, go talk to them. And you don't even have to have a bill number in mind. You can just say, I'm very concerned about microplastics. I would love for you to do something about it. Call them. Talk to them. Let your decision makers know that you're concerned about these things.
I'm just going to add to that really quickly because of the new federal administration that we are seeing come into play that is a lot more pro-fossil fuel. It's going to be really hard for us, I think, in the next 4 years to get much passed, unless there's some really great scientific data out there that is that just can't be argued against. Yet the most power that we're going to have, I think, is really working with the state. And so Melissa's suggestions of contacting your state representatives and your local representatives, even on a city level and a county level. Because one thing that this next administration is seems to be support of is a smaller government leadership, right? So it's a really good time to start working on aligning your city, county, and state in the right direction for our environment and human health.
And those folks are more accessible for coffee hours or things like you're saying, Melissa. So, well, on that note, there was one more question, sort of segueing from what you said, KT, about feeling overwhelmed and how you all keep going in this work where we are surrounded by microplastics, and keep moving forward. What gives you hope? If you can speak to that in this moment, fair if you can't.
Long pause. It's difficult, right? Because the more you learn, the more you know, the more you know that, yeah, it's an uphill battle. So we do just, again, I think in any of these battles, we find joy in working with each other, joy in the community, and knowing that we're in this together. And you celebrate all the wins, even the small wins. And like with the art project, like trying to find ways to make the work enjoyable can go a long way. It for not just bringing people in to educational purposes can help, but it also helps us to keep going if there's something that's enjoyable like that. Yeah, we have to give ourselves a lot of pep talks too. I don't know, Erica and KT, if you have something to add to that.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think this work is overwhelming and you can get really bogged down. And sometimes I do, I'll be honest. But I always come back to the work, and I've been doing this a long time now. And I think I'm always going to be doing this. And I think the part of that is because I find the people that are in this work and the communities that are doing this are some of the best people I know. And it's just passionate, really hardworking people, and people who have been really harmed by these environmental health issues. And I just feel that we need to align ourselves with what people really need most, who have been impacted and live in impacted communities. And that brings me a lot of like hope and positive sort of like, okay, we're doing this together. We're in it together. I just don't know what else I would ever do. And even though it does feel really overwhelming, I'm like, that part of it is so overwhelming too, in a good way, that it like keeps you going. So yeah, I think about that question probably too much, because yeah, it can get, the issues are real and there's a lot of them. So.
And like KT said, we fight for our families, we fight for our community members. When you see people being injured and dying too young, like that gives you some motivation right there. And so that's happening. And we don't want that to happen. These are, our community members and some of the best people that we know. And yeah.
Yeah, and just to finish it up here is, when I go into stores and I see there's options for plastic alternatives, like a glass bottom for a spray bottle, that's in a major grocery store, was like how Melissa said, you celebrate the wins, right? Seeing something like that is celebratory. Or finding a backpack that's like a wax canvas backpack that, or going to the thrift store and finding some amazing wool sweatshirt. These are all like the little things I surround myself with, and try to reduce plastic in my home and for my family. And at the same time, there's an entire global movement. Breakthrough from Plastic is a global movement with, global regional leadership, and they are centering environmental justice leaders in everything that they do, and that gives me hope. And it's full of young people, And it's amazing to see the amount of change we've been able to create through coming together. And so it really does take everyone, and the more people, the stronger we're going to be. It's a, David and Goliath, and it's, it's not just David anymore. So yeah, thank you all for being here on this webinar and being interested in this topic.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you, for your work and for being here and sharing your wisdom and so many resources. We will be sure to push that out, all of that information. And yes, good luck tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.